Has a Master of Education degree from the University of Prince Edward Island and a 4-year fellowship degree in illustration and advertising, with a special interest in creative writing from the Ontario College of Art. She's a trade published author, professional illustrator, and full-time college professor. She's both author and illustrator of the novel Swampy Joe, and illustrator for the children's book La News, and for the nonfiction book Come On Over Northeastern Ontario A to Z. Her writings appeared in several Canadian national magazines, as well as has been anthologized. And she also has academic writing that's been published. Now, the novel that's up for the nomination for the Whistler Independent Book Award is called Dying Hour. And it's part prose, part radio play, and part theatrical script. It's about a late night radio DJ who's deemed the hour from 5 a.m. to 6 a.m. to be the dying hour, because his chest tightens at that time of night. He challenges his listening audience to speculate about how they might die. Timothy is a 9-year-old boy who calls in to share how he thinks he will die. In doing so, Timothy reveals details about his family situation that gets other adult listeners riled up. So I think I'll leave it there and let Jennifer tell you more.
Okay, thank you very much. This is the book, Dying Hour. And as you said, Pat, it is a hybrid book. It just kind of happened that way. The upside of that is that it makes it, a quick and easy read. There's certainly some prose and then, some very clear dialogue. It does make it a little challenging for a non-actor to read, but I'm going to begin with an introduction to Stan Templeman. He's the main character who's a radio show host. Stan Templeman's big frame fills the stingy doorway, black silhouette against a sharp white rectangle of light. He holds the sound studio's simple flat door fully open for a moment, perusing the dark interior appreciatively. "I'm home," he says, launching a booming laugh. Stan is a big man all around, big body, big heart, big voice. Stan clicks the door shut in a practiced back kick. The door disappears into a long expanse of wall that is painted the color of strong coffee with a shot of Bailey's. The studio is in all but total darkness. He flicks on a computer monitor. The screen shines up at him. He turns to check the time on the large West Clock's clock on the wall behind him. The clock ticks, and one long black arm on the white face moves a single second closer to midnight. Then he pats his ample belly and turns sideways to admire his full girth in the dim reflection on the half wall of glass that faces his workstation. Beyond the glass reflection is the sound engineer's booth, as empty and hollow as a grave. It is from this dead space where time and man do not exist that we, Stan's audience, watch. In the reflection, Mama appears. "Like a truck driver, my son Stan, and his voice, wah! At 2 years old, he sounded like a man who'd smoked a pack a day for a lifetime. What could my little Stan Templeman do but go into radio?" Stan looks at his reflection. "Mama's happy boy," he says. His smile freezes, then droops. He reaches into his back pocket and pulls out a small silver flask, marked with age but gleaming. What little light there is in the studio bounces off its metal curves. He takes a quick swallow before placing the flask in his breast pocket. He makes switch selections, and a small festival of colored lights sparkles on his face as he takes his station. "The countdown to party is on." Stan's voice is all bass. It seems to boom through the studio, shaking the glass partition that once held a sound technician, the invisible wall that separates Stan from the past. For a dozen years now, Stan has used that voice to earn his coin. His voice started out old and never grew younger. It never grew older either, but it did grow wider. By the time Stan was 16, his voice squatted around him like hovercraft padding when he spoke. People moved away from it, even as they smiled at Stan. His voice is the rumbly kind that stays low to the ground, picking up dirt and gravel as it strokes the earth, and then rises to belly level to sock you in the gut. Stan, when he speaks, is a mountain. And once he began to smoke late in his teens, his voice trolled even lower to the ground, picking up blacker gravel than it had when he was young. Stan checks the West clock. The two black needle hands meet at the top in silent prayer. Stan commands a digital music cue with a poke from one square fingertip, and a flourish of sultry cello notes underscored by piano escapes. He brings one cup of a pair of headphones near one ear and all but kisses the mic with his mouth. Good eventide, all you lost souls and sad sisters in our lusty, rusty city tonight. Stan, your temple man, is here to soothe your sorrows a little with some R&B. The darkness around Stan seems to snuggle in closer. And now I think I need to introduce Timothy, who calls in. So it is now 5 a.m. Stan has been at work since midnight. This is Stan the Temple Man coming to you from inside your radio in the dying hour of 5 a.m. A phone rings. Stan jumps a little. Woman caller. So why is it the dying hour? Are you like sick? Stan. I am in a way, m'lady. I am always, even after 12 years of this midnight to 6 shift, I am always sick unto death in the 5th hour of the wee morning. My chest gets tight and my stomach cramps, and I feel like the very air I breathe is being squeezed from my lungs. Every 5 a.m., and it lasts about an hour. I am sure that I will die of a heart attack at 5 a.m. someday in my future. Woman caller. Wow. Stan. What about you, m'lady? How do you predict that you will die when your time comes? I think I'll die in a train accident. A train accident. Oh, now that's interesting. A big catastrophic train accident or a little bitty rail car falling over with a bump kind of accident? Woman caller. Big. Fire maybe, and a whole pileup of derailed train cars. Stan whistles. Any idea of when this might happen? Time of day, season, weather conditions? Woman caller. Maybe in the spring, lots of mud and guck stuck to the windows after, blending with the blood of everyone. Stan. Will you see that when you're dead? No, definitely not. I'll be very, very dead. Stan hiccups on a laugh. So, do you take the train much? Woman caller, never, not ever. Stan, no wonder why. The phone rings. Timothy. Hello, Mr. Temple, it's Timothy. The kid on the line can't be more than 7. His voice is high and weightless. Stan, I'm sorry, son, you must have the wrong number. This is an adult radio show. Is everything okay? Timothy. I'm just up is all. I heard you on my laptop. I thought maybe I'd call and tell you how I think I'll die. Stan hesitates. This is the dying hour, so go ahead, Tim. Timothy, please. I just thought you might like Tim better. It sounds older in a way. I do like Tim better, but my dad wants me to be called Timothy, not Tim, so you better call me Timothy. Stan. Would he know if I called you Tim? It could be our little secret. Timothy. I think he'd know. I don't know how, but I just think he'd know, and I don't like it when he knows. Please just call me Timothy. Timothy's an all right name. It's just that, well, I feel like I have to stand up straight when my dad calls me Timothy. Like if my hair's sticking out, I gotta fix it, get it to lay down right. But he's my dad and I gotta respect him. I just don't want dad to hear me and get up. You know, if the knowing somehow wakes him up. I want to tell you how I'm going to die. I think I know my way. The floor's all yours, Timothy. Okay. I think I'm going to die because someone's going to come through my bedroom window and take me away and beat me up and hurt me and scare me until I die from being so scared by them. The line is quiet, but Timothy can be heard breathing hard. Deep, quick breaths. My, that's a really scary idea, Timothy. Yep. More heavy breathing. Are you trying not to cry, Timothy? Uh-huh. more quiet, more breathing, muffled sounds like a pajama sleeve wiping across a face and phone like the bow of a violin. Timothy. But I'm not going to cry because my dad would know if I cried, and that wouldn't be good. The words come out in a near whisper. And those are our two main characters. Thank you.
Oh, thanks very much. That was delightful. I have a son-in-law who's a radio DJ, so it resonated a bit for me. And I used to be a 9-year-old boy, so there you go. I can relate as a reader. So let me ask you a couple of questions, and then we'll turn back to Mary. You wrote this novella partly as a radio play and a theatrical script. Was it your intention to have it performed as a play, or how did you come up with that idea?
Well, the first draft of this book was written in a novel marathon over 73 hours. And I did get, the whole story arc in that time. The character of Stan was kind of clear in my mind. Again, it's a marathon and I showed up with no real ideas, right? I began. But I had met a 2-year-old boy back when my children were around the same age. And he just wandered into my sister's backyard one day from a neighboring house. The family had just moved in, and he's 2, so he's very short. And he walked up to her and he said, "Hi, my name's Dustin. We just moved in." And he had this voice that was incredible in a 2-year-old. It was shocking. So I had an idea of, we have this person who's distinctive, and it would make sense that they would make a living with that voice. My intention wasn't necessarily to make it a radio play, but I absolutely love theater. And because I live in Northern Ontario and we spend a fair amount of time driving, often in the dark, right? Come winter, it's dark at 4 o'clock. I have listened to a fair amount of radio plays, and there's something very intimate about the dark and about nothing but a voice to kind of, to hang on to. And so it seemed natural to lay it out that way. I hadn't necessarily intended to keep it that way, but I wanted the story to follow an arc, and then it didn't seem to make sense to change it once I got away from the novella and that, that tendency to want to put it down quickly in like a sketch.
Oh, interesting. Well, it's interesting that you should mention that, because I lived up in the Arctic for a number of years, and radio was very key and relevant. It was only CBC radio that we had, but radio plays is a little bit of a lost art these days. It's kind of taken over with podcasts, but that, there's something about just hearing voice, and writers who can capture voice, the dialogue of these different characters. I think that really is something that's important for readers, because we bring our own. I think we bring our own selves to the work, and it's always nice to hear an author, put a voice to the characters. And yours was very enjoyable. Now, I was reading a little bit about you, and it said that you're a French Canadian Catholic and English Protestant blend. And your parents grew up throwing rocks at each other.
They did.
Yes. So tell us a little bit about that, and tell us how that influences your work, or if it does.
It absolutely. I think the biggest part of it is that I grew up with conflict on a daily level. Now, not that my parents stayed married, for 42 years. My mother, passed away ultimately. So they had a strong marriage, a dedicated one, a loyal one, and a lot of friendship in there. But they came from very different ways of doing things and of seeing the world. And I've always been aware of, that sort of tension between you know, they're cultures that aren't terribly far apart and yet are hugely far apart. So when I write, I am mostly interested in seeing how characters take situations that seem unresolvable on one level or another, and how they, you know, how they find an opening, how they find a way to, you know, to make it right, to make it feel good, to make, you know, lemonade out of lemons, to use that old cliche. So yeah, the fact that Northern Ontario is pretty rugged and hard, and winters are long, and there is a lot of darkness. There are, like everywhere, I'm sure, you know, clashes between, you know, the various settlers and their families. And yeah, I just happen to be the pairing of two people who quite literally grew up, you know, on opposite sides of this imaginary line.
And I would imagine that a lot of that appeared in your earlier work, Swampy Joe, the
Yes.
book that you dedicated to your mother.
Yes, yes. Swampy Joe was actually set in Sudbury, which is where I grew up. I can imagine it very clearly. Very odd landscape, beautiful lake with, you know, beautiful huge homes, and then literally, you know, a block or two away, there's a train. I'm not sure what they're called. The area where, you know, train cars are stored underneath the tracks and so on. There's a psych hospital very near that area. So the geography and I think the reality, the kind of underlying, I'm going to call it ugliness and hardness of a northern life with those tensions in it, on, you know, on a very everyday kind of level. Yeah, it was very important in the story of Swampy Joe. The setting was perhaps not a character, but certainly pivotal to, you know, the journey that the main character Swampy Joe had to take from feeling silenced to finding her voice.
Great, good. Well, listen, I'm going to turn to Mary now for a while and get you off the hot seat, and talk to Mary about her book. I mean, the actual, you know, one of the things I love about nonfiction is the stories that you encounter about people in their lives, you know, and this is a remarkable story, Mary, and I found it fascinating, you know, how a former client sort of became a member of the family and has lived with you for such a long period of time. And I was wondering how that came about, and how did it turn into a book, you know, or how did you turn it into a book, and why? Oh, you're muted, Mary. You'll have to unmute yourself.
Can you hear me?